What if I told you that consistency is not a strategy, luck is not a strategy, and going viral, while it is a strategy, is probably the worst strategy for you to get to the podcast goals that you have determined are important to you? Podcast Growth Nation, today for episode number 147, the best advice I could ever give a podcaster. I was sitting in my office today and I was thinking to myself, what do I want to do for an episode? What do I think would be valuable? What do I think would move the needle? And I had a very, very simple thing come to me. And this simple thing has come to me many, many times working with many podcasters and many YouTubers and many business owners in general. Okay? One, you have to ask. Most people aren't just going to give you something. Now, that's not the actual best piece of advice. We'll get into that. But I've worked with a lot of people who might have large audiences, but behind the scenes, when you talk to them, you realize they're not making any money. I'm working with somebody right now who that's kind of been an issue. They have a very big audience. We're talking tens and tens and tens of thousands of subscribers, but they never ever ask for anything. And they are wondering why they haven't made any money. It makes total sense. I think we assume when we get to a certain place, a certain number, people will just start coming out of the woodwork and giving us things. And that just doesn't work. It just doesn't work that way. All we have to do is think of it as a percentage. So let's say it's 1%, which is probably not. It depends on who you are and what you do. Okay, 1%. Out of every 100 people that listen to you or subscribe to you, one person reaches out. I would venture to guess it's probably like 0.1%. So it's every 1,000 people that listen to you, maybe one person reaches out. Again, it depends on you. But it's not going to change the ratio. It's always going to be 1,000 to 1. So yeah, if you have 70,000 subscribers, maybe it's 7 people instead of 1 person. I think that's a very important understanding to have. You could get 1 million listens tomorrow. It doesn't mean that all of those people are going to reach out. It doesn't mean that most of those people are going to reach out. Statistically speaking, most of them are not going to reach out and never will, because that's just the way it works. And it's like that in everything. How many people see a commercial versus how many people go and buy the car? How many people get the email from Domino's versus how many people actually do it? Everybody, and big companies and a lot of restaurants and whatever, everybody is trying to figure out how to make that number go up. Okay, we sent an email to 100,000 people, 2,000 people took action. How do we get that to 2,100? And people are studying this and studying this and studying this. So that's one thing I want to throw out right in the beginning. I have worked with incredible people. I've worked with 2 different types of people, and predominantly one type, but there's been 2. One is somebody who is extremely humble. They're really good at what they do. They are deeply heart-driven and they want to add value. They never ask for anything. And they're afraid to make themselves look good. The opposite side is somebody who has an ego, only wants to make themselves look good, doesn't really care about adding value, and doesn't really have that much value to add. I don't work with those people, luckily, but I have in the past. I love working with the first type of person because, number one, all I have to say is we just have to start asking in an aligned way. That's part 1, after you add value. Part 2, we have to show how amazing you actually are, because you're amazing. You're hiding from your greatness, not leaning into it. That's part 2. And then part 3, we need to figure out what a sustainable strategy for you is. So here's the best advice I could give to any podcaster, any business owner, anybody, really, anybody who's trying to go from where they are to where they want to get to. Without a strategy, you are going to lose. And again, that might be hardcore. I don't mean it that way. I don't want to rain on your parade. I have worked with way too many podcasters who come to me and they say, yep, I have this offer. I know when I start talking about it on the podcast, people will reach out. I'll be able to make money and then I'll be able to do this full time. No, most likely not. No, most likely not. I'm going to take you behind the scenes. And again, I don't know, nobody else is going to do this, most likely. We just filled our 18th round of Next Level group coaching. You've heard me talk about it, the Next Level Podcast Accelerator. Okay, 10 people. We've done it 18 times. So we've got 180 seats filled for this group coaching program. I would say maybe 10 out of those 180 people signed up cold just by listening to the podcast, just by getting an email without a conversation with us. We have had people that we had no idea who they were, just sign up. We saw the email come through. This person signed up. Awesome. 10 out of 180. And again, that all things considered, that's higher than what I was talking about at the beginning, right? That's what, like 5-ish percent, 6%, something like that. Not terrible if you think about it. It's not terrible. But that is higher than I would expect for almost anybody else. It's higher than I expect for us. For this last group, all 10 people were having conversations, one-on-one conversations with either Alan or myself. I reached out to somebody. I was on her podcast a year ago. I reached out. I sent her an audio. I said, I think this is something that would be really good for you based on where you are. Here are the details. This is the landing page. If you have any questions, let me know. She had one question. I answered it. And then she said, I'm in. Tell me next steps. But that had a requirement of me to message her in order for that to happen. Now, again, this is where it gets a little different. If we, in 10 years, if we continue growing at the rate we're growing, it will be way easier to fill 10 seats because the audience will be bigger. Yes, 100%. Because it's a finite thing. There's only 10 seats. It only happens 4 times a year. It's a little bit different than, maybe something else, another offer. But here is the advice. We have to figure out some level of strategy, and we have to be very, very freaking honest with ourselves about what that strategy is going to be. I can't stand so many of these ads I see and so much of the bullshit I see out there where people say, your podcast will get you clients on demand. It's going to be your best performing salesperson. This. Yes, with the very, very, very small exception to the rule, that can happen. Yes. Yes, it definitely can. But it won't happen for most of us. And that's just me being honest. I'm not saying you shouldn't be a podcaster. I'm not saying you shouldn't have products or services. I deeply believe in having the opportunity to monetize your podcast so you can do it sustainably and you can have longevity. I am a huge proponent of that. I just think most people are lying. I just don't. Not all podcast coaches and not all podcast consultants and not all podcast companies, I'm not saying it's everyone, but all of the ads I see are advertising results not typical to people that don't understand that. So we have to figure out some level of strategy. What is the strategy going to be? And then we have to figure, okay, well, why do we want to take that strategy? I think what a lot of people do is they think the strategy is, I'll podcast for a year, I'll have a big enough audience, then I can just talk about something on the podcast, and then people will do it. And I'm telling you, that is less likely to happen than it was at the beginning of my journey in 2017. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of calls to action, there's a lot of stuff going on, there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of distraction. That isn't a great strategy. Now, please don't villainize me for saying that. I've just worked with so many podcasters who, they come to me, okay, you've heard me say this before, and I get fired up. What time is it? Okay, I gotta make sure I have time here. I get fired up because I'll work with somebody I was working with somebody who was getting like 500 to 750 listens per episode. Low end 500, high end 750 episode a week, right? So do the math on that. Let's say they're doing 3,000 listens per month, but it's actually more than that because it's the back catalog. So let's say it's 5,000 listens per month. Okay, great number. Love that. They weren't getting any clients. They had products and services and offerings. They had a meditation course. They had a bunch of stuff. And they said, well, I'll just talk about it on the podcast and then people will come through and they'll sign up for it. And I said, that's not going to happen. I said, you need to start having one-on-one conversations with your audience. I'm telling you, I've seen this a million times. It's not going to work. They said, okay. Well, I'm going to try it my way and then we'll see what happens. Cool. All right. It's my job to raise your awareness. It's your job to figure out whether or not it's aligned for you to take action on the new awareness. You do you. Nothing happened. So they come to me and they say, you know what it is? I actually have a new offer that I think is even better and more aligned. Maybe both of those could be true. Both of those could be completely true, and we still might not get the result. I said, again, the strategy piece, you're missing the strategy piece. The strategy is, how do we actually get the result that we want? It's not to hope that people hear the episode and then follow up. It's not, that's out of your hands. That's out of your control. Yes, you can influence that, but you can't really control it. I said, you have to have one-on-one conversations with your audience. That's what you got to do. You got to do that. Well, I don't really want to do that, so I'll make another offer and that'll be it. And we're at this point already 3 to 5 offers deep. And all I mean by an offer is a course, a product, a service, coaching, whatever it is. And eventually it got to the point where this person, I told them, I said, I don't think if you are focused on getting clients and turning this into a full-time business, that podcasting is the best bet for you. I said, honestly, I don't know what is, because you're going to have one-on-one conversations with people. I don't know if this is right for you because you're not willing to do the strategy. Is that strategy for everybody? No, that strategy is not for everybody. Is that something that works really well for coaches? And yes, I've seen it happen time and time again. Yeah, it works really well. It works really, really, really well. But it's not the strategy that everybody wants. So that's a deeper conversation of what's an aligned strategy for you. I just see this so often. And maybe you're stuck right now and you're saying, I feel like I'm producing really good content. I'm having good guests on. I have a good landing page. I have a good website. I know, but I'm telling you, that's not enough. If you had 1 million people, yeah, it would be different. Like you could get, maybe you'd get 100 people. Maybe you'd get 1,000 people. Maybe. But that's because you have 1 million people. If you have 1 million people listening to each episode, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. The problem is most of us can't survive long enough to get there. And that's why the strategy is so important. The strategy when you're huge is drastically different than the strategy when you're not. And a lot of people talk about, well, that's not scalable. I don't want to trade my time for money. I still trade my time for money. And I've been doing this for 7 years. My department in our business is a multi-six-figure business within itself. I still trade my time for money because I'm not at the place yet where I have the demand where I wouldn't do that. And I just think that's a humble way to look at it. Does it suck at times? Absolutely. Yes, it does. But that is our strategy. And our strategy tends to be working really, really well. I don't know. I think a lot of people, if you're a heart-driven person and you started a podcast because you want to add value to others, and then it got to the point where you said, wow, if I could make money on this, it would be really awesome. I think for a lot of us, it feels dirty to have a strategy. It's like, I don't know. I feel like maybe you feel like you're taking advantage of people, or maybe you feel like you're not doing it for the same reason you started with. And I completely understand that. I'm very motivated by money. Not in a negative way. It's just I didn't have a lot of money growing up, and for me, money is certainty. I just feel better about the present and the future. I just feel safer when I have money in the bank. And when I started talking about that, I remember thinking, everybody's going to think I'm a fraud. You started a self-improvement company, a personal development company, but you care about money. Oh, that's not very philanthropic. And I was so afraid of that. But that is the truth. I am somebody who values money.
What's going on, guys? My name is Austin, and I've been working with Kevin for a few months now. If there's one thing that I find super valuable is his expertise on how to position the podcast to the right audience and fit the content into the overall business plan. And frankly, when we work together, he challenges me a lot. There were some tough conversations that he initiated with me so that I can really grow in the business. Besides the coaching part, the editing team does amazing work with editing and show notes and staying on top of all communications. Overall, my experience working with Kevin has really been top-notch.
Another truth that I think is hard to understand is there is a strategy. Yeah, there is a strategy. You can do the strategy that you want to do in an aligned way. It doesn't have to be the strategy everybody else is doing. It can be your own. Here's a really good example of a strategy. And you've heard me say this before. have a client, awesome client. This client helps people get visibility online. So she works with a lot of dietitians, a lot of doctors and nurses, and essentially entrepreneurs. She said, I have a lot of clients who are interested in starting a podcast. Will you come in and do a speech on podcasting? Absolutely. Yes. Okay, here's my strategy. And this is all reverse engineered with alignment, though. I think there's a difference between strategy and like conscious centered strategy. I add value. I create a Canva presentation. I want to add as much value as possible. At the end, I offer every single person a free podcast breakthrough session, right? Just like I do on this show. A lot of people say, well, that's not scalable. What if everybody books? Awesome. Great problem to have. I think I ended up getting 4 or 5 people that booked podcast breakthrough sessions. Awesome. I've done 3 podcast breakthrough sessions. Here's the thing. Okay. Just like I tell you, not a sales call. And these are the same exact thing. Based on where you are and where you aspire to be, what do you believe is the most valuable use of our time? Like, let me guide you based on where you want to get guided. This, and this. Awesome. Love that. Cool. Let me answer those questions. Let me answer all the other questions you have. Let me whiteboard. Boom, boom, boom. Awesome. We'll record it. Cool. You'll get the transcript. Awesome. All 3 of those calls. At the end, the person said, what do you do and what does it look like to work with you? This is what we would do for you specifically. Boom, boom, boom. Here's the pricing. What are your thoughts? And it wasn't even that. It was, is that something that you would find valuable? Or is that in your budget? Or do you have a different budget? The strategy is not to get on sales calls with people. The strategy is to add value and let them ask if it's aligned what it would take to work together. That's the strategy. And that strategy works really, really well. You could do the same thing. Another example, somebody in group coaching, our last round of the Podcast Accelerator. Afterwards, it was in the middle. She said, hey, can we hop on a call? And I said, yeah, of course. Here's my link. Let's do it. She has gotten, what is the word? Hypnotherapy certified, I believe is what it was. And she said, I've been talking about it a lot on the podcast and I still haven't had a call yet. And I said, well, how much are you charging? I think she said like $150 an hour. And I said, well, how many sessions have you done? And she said, I haven't done any sessions yet. And I said, okay, cool. 1, are you even ready to charge $150 an hour for something you haven't done? That's a deeper question. 2, how many free calls have you offered? And she said, I haven't offered any free calls. I said, all right, cool. This is the strategy that I would practice in order to get the result you aspire for. Every time you have a guest on your podcast that is an aligned guest, I want you to send them a follow-up email, not copy and paste, a custom follow-up email. Hey, Kevin, thank you so very much for joining me on the podcast. You can insert the name. As a token of my appreciation, or I enjoyed our session so much, or I really appreciate all the value you added to my audience and I want to add value to you. I'd love to offer you a free hypnotherapy breakthrough session, completely free. A free hour. And she said, do you think people will do it? And I said, I guarantee people will do it. I'm willing to bet if you send 10 messages, at least one person will say yes. She sent 6 messages and everybody replied and said, yes, they're interested. Will one of those people end up working with her? I don't know. Because there's a sales component, there's a pricing component, there's a lot of stuff that factors in. That could be her strategy forever. And she could potentially have the opportunity to get one new client every time she has a podcast guest on. Is that going to work forever? No. But that is the strategy. All a strategy is a system that replicates results. Hopefully. Right? It's a system that is intended to replicate desired results. That's all a strategy is. But I think for a lot of us, we end up thinking the strategy is just to wait and see. That's not a strategy. That's not a good strategy. If the ship is sinking, you don't just wait and see. You get to a lifeboat, you figure something out, right? You gotta figure out what the strategy is. And I think the other reason I'm so passionate about this is because at the beginning, I didn't have a strategy. And I most likely would have lost. I wouldn't be here today if I didn't have a strategy and if I didn't connect with my business partner who's an engineer and that's all strategy. and reverse engineering things, that this was not a strength of mine. That's why I'm so passionate about talking about it, because there's so many podcasters out there who are just so heart driven and they have great messages and they have these massive hearts, but they think that that's going to become the strategy. And for most of us, it just doesn't work that way. You guys might not know of this person. There was this guy on Instagram named Liver King. And I'll make this land, hopefully. It seemed like he went viral. He just came out of nowhere. And it's because he was like eating raw liver. He was just doing some weird stuff. Eventually, emails came out about how he said he was a natural athlete and he was using a ton of steroids and all this other stuff. But one of the things that jumped off the page for me was he said, I'm working with a marketing agency and I'm paying them $10,000 a month to help me go viral. That was his strategy. He didn't just go viral. That was reverse engineered. He was working with people who knew how to make him go viral. Actors and actresses. The strategy is you get in some sort of agency with representatives who are connected to directors in movie companies and studios. That's how a lot of people get their success. That's their strategy. I need to get models. I need to get into a modeling agency. That's why when there's like an independent artist who is crushing it in the music scene, it's very spoken about because their strategy is just different, but not the strategy that most people are going to take. They go grassroots and all this other stuff. So I don't want to get too far off on a tangent here, but the best advice I could ever give you is start testing out strategies that you can actually get short-term results from. All I mean by short-term results is you can get feedback from. So if that person that I suggested offered those 6 free hypnotherapy breakthrough sessions, everybody said no, that is feedback. Does that mean that strategy is not going to work? Not necessarily. Maybe the messaging is off, but then we strategize on the message. Then we strategize on who we send it to. When do we send it? There's a lot of things that we can do. It doesn't mean the strategy is wrong. It just means maybe one of the ingredients might be wrong. But that's a really good example of something that you can start and actually get feedback from. I didn't expect podcast breakthrough sessions to go as well as they did. But the strategy was hop on a call with someone, add as much value as humanly possible. That was number one. It will always be number one. Number two is learn as much as you can about what people are struggling with so you can add value. I have a podcast about podcasts. And then down the list, 3, 4, 5, that's where it is a potential to meet clients. But that's never number one. All things considered, in the beginning, I was getting a lot of deeper understanding and a lot of lessons in meeting people. And there wasn't a lot of clients. Understandably so. All right. But eventually, that really started to compound because my goal is to add value. And then if you add value, usually people will say, how can you add more value into my life and what does that look like? Now, again, it's not going to be the strategy for everybody, but there has to be some level of strategy. Because if we don't have strategy, we are just on a hope, we are on a wish, we are hoping for luck, you're hoping to go viral, you're most likely not going to. I also know people who have gone viral that didn't understand how they went viral, they couldn't replicate it because they didn't have a strategy. So strategy is everything. It is the unsung hero of everything. It really is. Right now, I'm on a diet, which sucks, but I started at 190 pounds. In my bulk. I was trying to get strong as an ox. And today I'm at 176. So I'm down 14 pounds. Is that correct? Yes. I want another 16 pounds. No, 6. Sorry. 6. I want to go to 170. So I want to lose 20 pounds. I have the strategy on how to do that. I know how to do it. I've been doing the bodybuilding thing for a long time, right? That's a strategy that I have that I know how to practice and I know the results that come with it. I can get that result. I don't even have to think about it that much. I still have to do all the activities and exercise and track macros and everything, but it's not like I wake up saying, I really wonder if I'll be able to get there. It's just a matter of time. And that's essentially what a good strategy will do. It's just something you have to run over and over and over again. And eventually it catches up, but it just takes time. So that is my soapbox message for today. I'm fired up about this just because I think that starting a podcast, the barrier to entry is super low. Anybody can do it. You don't need any equipment anymore. You don't really need to learn that many technical skills, right? There's a lot of AI stuff that'll help you with audio editing and stuff like that. So the barrier to entry is the lowest it's ever been. But that also means the skill requirement is the lowest it's ever been. So you might start a podcast thinking, okay, this is going to be the thing that boosts me. It's like, no, probably not. Not without a strategy, it won't be. Unless you're very, very early on. Like if there was something that came out, like let's say so virtual reality podcasts where you could watch a podcast in the metaverse and be there live. When that comes out, the people who do that faster than everybody else will get better results with less strategy probably, but that's their strategy. Get there before everyone else does. And then as that strategy starts to wear away, we will have to figure out our own unique strategy, right? There's not necessarily a need for any more donut shops in my city. So if we are going to open a donut shop, we have to have a different strategy than, well, our name is Dunkin' Donuts. That's not going to work for us. We actually have to go in a very different direction. The strategy is we're a mom and pop shop. Every donut is custom made. We have world-class customer service, whatever it is. There just has to be a different strategy. All right, I'm done with that. Okay, if you want to work on your strategy, and I promise I am not going to sell you anything. You just heard the strategy underneath it. The getting clients part's literally the last part. I'm not joking about that. If you need to work on your strategy, I will have my link below for a free 30-minute podcast breakthrough session. Bring all the questions you got. Let's talk about how you want to monetize. Let's talk about the strategies you're currently practicing. And my goal will be to help you leave with a list of tactics, a list of actions. So I'll have that below. I have been jeffing, as we say, which means to be screwing up, with Podcast Growth Nation. The business has grown a ton, and I have to keep my eye on that because that is what supports the entire business. Revenue into the business creates opportunity for more revenue. But I am now at a place where I should be able to get back to consistent posting. So if you're looking for a group of podcasters who care about getting better at the art of podcasting and all the things that come with podcasting, I'll have the link below also for the Facebook group, Podcast Growth Nation. I hope for you feel like you have a better strategy. Maybe it's not directly from this episode, but you can take this episode and run with it and create some level of strategy. You can always email me stuff too. Kevin@nextleveluniverse.com. Feel free to email me stuff. If you email me your strategy, whatever it is. It's not like we have to hop on a breakthrough session. You can ask me questions. I'm more than happy to answer as many as I can. So Kevin@nextleveluniverse.com. All right, cool. As always, keep on crushing it. Keep on podcasting. Come up with that strategy, and I will talk to you all next week.